people, this is a new thing that Zoom does. It didn't used to say that out loud, but maybe people were complaining that it was getting recorded without their knowledge. Huh. Okay. So if people scraggle in as we're talking, we will just work around that. I put the agenda in the chat box right now. The first thing that maybe we could do is turn on the videos long enough to be able to do introductions of everybody who's here, since there are still, I know there's at least one new person in the group, but there are some other people who are still relatively new to the group. And I always think it's nice when you get to hear people say their names more than once. And then you can put a name with the face. The one nice thing about Zoom is that you do get to see people's names sitting right there. So when you forget their name, you can just look at it. Not like in real life where you have to pretend that you've known their name all along and that you didn't actually forget what it is. So hi, everyone. I think I know almost everybody here. Angie Hong, that I coordinate the East Metro Water Resource Education Program. And I'm feeling a little woo-woo because Karen and I just got done doing a 4-hour workshop with realtors that Barbara was also sitting in on. So it's been a lot of talking for quite a while happening this morning. But I see Caleb to my left, so I'm going to pass the mic to him.
Caleb Anderson with Pine County Planning and Zoning Department.
All right, maybe if everybody could just pass it to somebody else after they're done.
Barb Heidkamp.
Hey everybody, I'm the new partner in crime to Angie. This is my first day and she's like, let's just start you off with meetings all day. I'm like, sounds great. I'm here.
It normally won't be like this, hopefully, but maybe sometimes.
But definitely just excited to start diving in, exciting to start learning the players, the people, being able to go and see and do some things, and obviously be a bit of a relief valve for Angie moving forward. And so she's built this immense program, and being able to help contribute to it, I'm really excited about. So glad to be here.
Well, and we'll do the official Barb introduction under.
I jumped the gun.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But Emily, I see you next on the screen.
Emily Hines, I'm with Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District, and I'll pass it to Karen.
Karen Kill with Browns Creek Watershed District. And I will pass it to Matt Moore.
Becky, it's good to see you. Been a long time. Matt Moore, administrator with South Washington.
I'll just go for it. Becky Wozni, Anoka Conservation District. I'm their wetland specialist, and I'll pass it on off to Jay.
Thanks, Becky. Jay Riggs, District Manager, Washington Conservation District. And want to clarify, I know it's a Midwestern tendency to shorten names, but Barbara, what is your preference for your first name?
Generally speaking, I appreciate it when people call me Barbara as they're getting first to know me, but I don't mind being called Barb by people who have gotten to know me a little bit. So
your middle name is a B as well?
It's my maiden name, Burkholder.
Got it. So not BB.
Please no.
Thank you. Please no. I'll hand it off to Tiffany.
I'm Tiffany Betterman with Isanti Soil and Water, and it's great to have you, Barbara. And I'm gonna pass it to Paul.
Paul Swanson, Pine SWCD manager. Trying to see who has not been chosen yet. Pass it to Matt.
The other Matt. Hi, Matt Downing with Middle St. Croix WMO, and I will see you later today because I also do stuff for WCD. Who's left?
We need to make Matt talk today.
Oh, come on, Matt. No. I guess Mike Kinney, I think you're still left.
Mike Kinney, are you there?
I think he had messaged me earlier. He might be on he got a phone call.
And
okay,
I'll
how
say
about
Jamie.
Zach then?
Oh, no, I want Jamie.
Oh, sorry.
I get to pick.
Now neither one of them is going to talk, Matt.
What do you need? I apologize. I just joined late.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm only popping in. Update me if you need to.
Say who you are and where you're from.
Oh, I'm Jamie. I'm from Iowa, but I don't ever acknowledge that. Anoka Conservation District.
Okay, then Zach gets to go.
Are you sure?
No, really?
I'm Zach Van Orsno. I am the slightly less new district technician at Pine Soil and Water.
Okay. And then I think Dan Fabian might be the last person.
Hi, Dan Fabian, Board of Water and Soil Resources. I do not have my camera hooked up today, so you are in luck. I don't know, did Caleb introduce himself?
I think Caleb went right after me. So I think it's everybody. Okay, so on the steering committee agenda, and for the steering committee meetings, I mean, we've got them scheduled once a month now, so they don't need to be long if they don't have to be long. I will just say that verbally out loud. Review action items for May 24th policy committee meeting. I think quite a few of you were in attendance at the policy committee meeting on Monday. And I don't know that there was a ton of action items. Sometimes the policy committee has, specific things that they request that we change or do. But one thing that we did talk about was the format for the future meetings and the schedule for the future meetings. So we had, a lengthy kind of go around about how often people wanted to meet, and they kind of settled on, for now, we scheduled follow-up meetings on July 26th and September 27th, with the possibility that on September 27th, they may either decide to keep doing it every other month, or they may decide to move to quarterly at that point in time. So there could be a final meeting of the year either in November or December. And the other thing that they would like to do is resume meeting in person. However, to also have a hybrid option so that people who are traveling or busy taking care of cows on their farm or doing whatever the thing is that they're doing could call in remotely. And so that will take a little bit of investigation on my part to learn how to do that and figure out where we could do that. And I'm semi-inclined to go with the recommendation Jackie had made of seeing if Forest Lake has their city hall set up to do that we could use their council chambers. I know Scandia has set up their council chambers to do that as well. If it was someplace that was already set up, it would be great. But I'm also not sure what the capacity is of either of those rooms. We have a pretty big policy committee, so I'm not sure if either of those rooms has a big enough space for all of us to be there indoors and still maintaining whatever COVID regulations might be existing in July and September. Stay tuned. But if anybody else has already figured it out, and I know that Jay said that we've got the technology to start doing it at our office. If anybody is starting to figure it out and wants to share your wisdom, I'm happy to hear the wisdom.
Yeah,
So,
just to clarify, Angie, all we have is a nicer camera with speakers. It's a wide angle, so it could shoot a whole room. And so what we have is more portable. We would use a combination of the video projector and the camera on a tripod. So, but we have that. Yeah.
I think it's relatively easy to have it set up so somebody remotely could see us all in person, but how to have them also be able to interact with us, that's the part that I'm not as sure about.
Yeah, that's where you would have to have either a video monitor or the projector attached to the computer.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So then maybe we'll just hop into subcommittee updates. And Jay, I know you just sent out an email, at least to Agronomy Outreach Subcommittee, but do you want to share an update from that group to start things off? No, you got muted.
Yes, thank you. The agronomy subcommittee met one time already, and we had a really good conversation about moving forward with the ag outreach position. Good conversation about what this position might do. Matt had some good comments about kind of this is like a position that's going to be a combination of an agronomist and a more of a technical kind of hands-on person. And so we really need to find somebody who has kind of a good balance of skills, who can talk economics, but also talk shop and farm with the landowners, and also be a good communicator, obviously, too. So, and then the other piece we talked about was whether or not we wanted to hire a full-time staff person or potentially work with the extension to have them provide that service. And so what I did then is I reached out to extension and was actually able to meet yesterday morning with Joel Larson and Mike Schmidt from the extension service, and had a really good, they said, hi, Barbara. Had a really good conversation with them, and they're going to put together a proposal for a couple different options that they can provide as an option. Either have the extension hire somebody that would just come in and do work, or have an embedded staff person who is actually located locally, but it's an extension employee. And so I'll be bringing that information to the agronomy outreach subcommittee as soon as that's available. I did send a note out to the group. If I don't have that information by Friday morning, we're going to reschedule our meeting, because we tentatively have a meeting set for Tuesday morning, right after Memorial Day. But we will be meeting soon to be able to look at that information. And I'll also be providing an example position description if we were going to hire a full-time staff. So the group will have information about the position and costs for both an extension collaboration and position and costs if it's hiring a full-time staff.
Okay.
I think that's it. Anybody else who is at those meetings want to comment? It was fun sitting down with Joel and Mike, because we were, we were talking a little bit how we're kind of competing with each other to see who could do it, and so that was fun. And so we're Mike and I are pretty serious salesmen, so we might have competing fancy 3D PowerPoint presentations on which options to consider for the group. So we're both hand talkers too.
Okay, that sounds great. I see neither Craig Mell nor Mike Eisensee here to talk about the urban and agricultural projects, but I know that they have a proposed language that they had submitted to the group. So let's push that off and hope that one of them joins the meeting at some point in time to be able to. I know that Mike said he couldn't, but I think Craig was planning on it. So let's push that off to later in the meeting so that they could explain that and what kind of approval they're hoping to get from the steering committee right now. In which case I can pick up on the watershed education update, which is very obvious that Barbara is here. But and Barbara said an initial hi, but would you like to tell people just a little bit more about yourself and your background and how you came to be here?
Sure. I'm a trained hydrologist, geomorphologist, geologist by training. So I have a bachelor's in geology and a master's in water resources science. I come from the Pacific Northwest. I moved to Minnesota following a boy, now husband, thankfully. So that was at least a good investment. I started work at the St. Anthony Falls Laboratory at the University of Minnesota as one of their researchers, and worked a little bit in the Minnesota River Basin, looking at ag BMPs and being able to keep water more up on the landscape. And then in 2015, I transitioned to their communications specialist for the laboratory. I was a bit more of an extrovert, and I got really interested in being able to figure out ways to more effectively message science. And so I've been in that capacity for the last 6 years, but kind of just started getting some itchy feet and kind of wanting to plug myself back more into kind of boots on the ground work, and was really excited by the opportunity when it came up, when I saw the posting come up. Just to be able to work in my local watershed. The lab has migrated more to general fluids versus really working in rivers and streams and watersheds. And so this is kind of, I feel like I'm coming back to my scientific home, which is really fun. Live in Bayport across from Karen Kill, and have 2 daughters. One is 4, one is 7. Really interested in getting them excited about being in the outdoors, enjoying nature. I love canoeing, kayaking, whitewater rafting. Not as much of that here, but I got to get up north a little bit more for that. And then, yeah, that's kind of about it. Just really excited to start getting to know the people and getting plugged in. So excited for the learning curve.
Yes, and we are very excited to have you. It was actually a very fun position process. I found it fun and invigorating to talk to, even though we were so excited to get Barbara, it was also just fun and invigorating to talk to all of these people who are, you know, interested in working in the field of watershed education and just excited about getting out there and educating the public. So it was a good process. And we're so happy that you're here.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Barbara. And so
Yes.
one of the things that we liked about some of the other candidates, though, was that we had one person who had a pill bug puppet that they did a demonstration for us, and another person had a mermaid costume that they used. So no pressure, but those are the things that, you know,
I will
were
up my
interesting to
game.
Angie.
I have plenty of puppets, so it might not be a sock puppet. It might be, I might be able to up the ante with like an actual puppet, you know.
So another thing that I wanted to talk with the steering committee about related to watershed education, and you're probably all going to be hearing a lot from Barbara and I now that she is on board. There's going to be a lot of kind of, you know, work and outreach needed to get things up and running and expand MREP into the northern counties. So you'll probably be hearing from us wanting to set up just kind of like you guys take us on a tour of your area, show us your cool projects, show us your cool sites. So, you know, like I have a really good feeling for what's in Washington County because I've been working here for 15 years now, but my knowledge base sort of stops at the county line. So this might be Craig calling right now. Hey, Craig, is that Craig?
Hey, I'm sorry. I thought it started at 2.
No, it started at 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll be right there.
Okay.
Bye.
Craig's coming. So you'll be hearing from us, and we usually with the MREP partners have twice a year a steering committee meeting when the group is both setting the agenda for what we want to do for the coming year in terms of education, but then also just checking in on how things have been going so far. And logistically, we're just going to have to kind of figure out how to do this with it, you know, an ever-growing group. Steering committee of 25 is already fairly large. And if we add in another, you know, 12 or so partners that aren't already in MREP, this could become a really, really big steering committee. And so we'll be talking about things like that, what kind of stuff you want to see happening in your area. But one thing I have on here and the bullet points under Barbara's name, it says virtual NEMO workshops and or fall tour. So in the past, pre-COVID, we have for the past 10 years been doing an annual St. Croix River workshop on the water when we take in Washington County and the Wisconsin side of the river, we take all of those elected officials out on a boat and we talk to them about the river. We trap them on a boat so they can't get away. And we talk to them about things like MIDs and vegetative management ordinances and shoreline ordinances. And it's been a really great way to build up our relationships and also, get them to actually want to come to the workshop. So we did something like that during the planning process that we had a boat workshop up in Taylor's Falls. I think for this year, it's still not very practical to try to plan that, to try to plan a boat workshop this year. Things are still a little too up in the air and, not wanting to sink a lot of effort. I know the DNR is not able to do like an in-person boat workshop necessarily without going through a lot of hoops. But I wondered if we might want to try to do something more like a project and site tour in the fall, something that would get that we could invite local elected officials to and get people actually outside and interacting in person instead of via Zoom. And I'm wondering what folks think about that, about planning. I see one thumbs up. Planning something in the fall is kind of a kickoff to that mids and shoreline variance kind of outreach that we might be doing in the future.
Angie, this is Matt.
Yeah.
What do you think about just meeting outside, like downtown Stillwater or up on the North Hill, in one of their parks, just casual?
Oh, like just like a mixer, a picnic
Yes.
potluck kind of thing.
Yes.
That's a possibility to consider as well. Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the things that people, have been, especially as we have this new partnership and people are still kind of getting to know each other. That's one of the things that people have been missing the most, is having that, interaction and getting to network with one another. So we can keep brainstorming on it, but I just thought I would put the idea out there, sink that idea into your minds.
That's a great idea. Just put it out there, and
yeah,
I mean, we're still waiting on the executive orders.
Yeah, and that's why to plan that boat workshop every year is a monumental effort, and also the boat is really expensive. So I wouldn't want to do any effort towards planning a boat workshop if it wouldn't for sure be able to happen. So I'm thinking 2022 would be the first time we'd be able to do something like that. But yeah, outdoor, that would be fun. I'm planning on doing something like that with our Master Water Steward volunteers, just doing a potluck picnic at Lake Elmo Regional Park maybe, and being able to get everybody out to see each other again. Okay, so Craig, you're here.
What does Matt Downing think?
What does Matt Downing think? Matt Downing loves people. Yep.
Sign me up. Let's have a party.
Actually, the last time that we did, I'm remembering we invited all the businesses in our business park to have a barbecue, and Matt was the designated griller. So
I'm not doing that again.
You're not doing that again.
No.
He does that really well, though. He's a good designated griller. Okay, Craig, since you are here, I skipped over your subcommittee thing. I think it was because Jay sent an email about rescheduling the time of the planning team meeting in a month.
Yes,
So
I
it's not,
apologize.
yes, it's understandable that would be confusing. But I skipped over you. So do you want to go back and talk about the memo that I sent out and what you are hoping to get approved by the group today? And then I know Mike Kinney sent out a follow-up memo to your memo.
Sure. Did anybody give up the update overall on the Ag Urban Practices Subcommittee? Do I need to give up the full update? Okay. So for those of you that attended this policy committee meeting on Monday, this is somewhat going to be duplicate, and Mike Eisenstein did a much better job than I will probably do. So the subcommittee met on May 18th. We combined subcommittees 2 and 5, which is the Ag and Urban programs, conservation programs, which include subcommittees, also activities 4 and 9. 4, I believe, is the non-structurals, and 9 is the technical assistance. But for right now, we tackled discussing different aspects of 2 and 4. I apologize, I'm looking at my notes on the computer screen. We had a very good meeting. Prior to the meeting, we did request shovel-ready projects from different participants. We did have 2 of the participants, South Washington Water District and Carnelian Marine, that submitted some project requests. And that's great. But we need to do first is really set up the policy. So if Angie did a good job, I believe sent out the information in the attachment that talks about what we need today. The subcommittee's role was to draft proposed cost share rates and policies. Then we'll send those rates to Bowser to review, which Bowser was part of that discussion. And so Dan Fabian basically gave us a thumbs up. Dan's more interested in the non-structural stuff right now that we need to be developing next. But basically then it says the subcommittee will not proceed with any projects until the steering committee has approved the rates and policies. At the end of the day, there was a lot of really good discussion by numerous members on this group about how we want to proceed. And Angie, I don't see my email that talks about exactly what we approved.
Do you want me to share the memo?
Could you do that, please?
Yeah. I have that open somewhere.
Quite ready, I guess, for the meeting because I thought it was at 2.
Here we go. Sorry, I have too many screens open. It took me a moment to figure out which one to share.
So here you can see the results of the day. At the end of the day, we have $360,000 worth of cost share dollars available. 160 were allocated under the ag, 200,000 under urban. We have an additional 125,000 that's needed in match. And our load reduction combined is 500 pounds per year. So pretty aggressive load reduction. As you can see here, the second bullet, item number 3, where it talks about the subcommittee will not proceed without the steering committee approval rates. At the end, the members of activities 2 and 5, which is probably about 10 of us on the meeting, came to some consensus on the language at the very bottom. The cost share amounts are based on subcommittee and steering committee recommendations and fiscal host approved percentage range, typically 75%, but potentially up to 100 with a total estimated project cost. The reason for that is as the fiscal agent, I want to make sure we're getting 98% of our match for this $1.26 million watershed-based implementation funds out of our cost share projects. And so my nervousness, maybe which was not preferred by everybody, my nervousness was we have to make sure we get the match met here before we go forward above and beyond 75% match. So that was the initial discussion, the initial recommendation by the group. Mike Eisensee actually typed this up and provided this information, so I appreciate Mike for doing that. And then I guess what I'll do now is I guess we can answer any questions on this one at this point, and those I'll turn over to Mike Kinney to let him discuss his proposed qualifier that would be required for this one. So any questions that I can answer at this point, or any other members want to add anything to what I've discussed?
Mike Kinney, are you there?
Matt Moore, do you have something you wanted to say? I see it turned on.
Yeah, I'll add something. The 75-25 is classic SWCD cost share, and it's not needed for one watershed, one plan.
That's correct.
The requirement is 10%. And
correct.
The project has matched that 12 times already. So I don't know why we're doing 75-25.
And I guess, Matt, as we had a good discussion during the meeting, at the end of the day, you are 100% that the watershed-based implementation funds require an overall grant 10% match. This group, steering committee through recommendations and ultimately the policy committee approving, has elected to have basically all of the match coming from these 2 cost share line items, which make up $360,000 of the 1.26 million. So a little over 25%, if my math is correct there, of the overall project dollars. So we have to, at the end of the day, have the $126,000, or it's actually $125,000 in match coming from these 2 activities, activity 2 and 5.
Yeah, and Craig, you're not going to be short from Washington County is going to meet your match in no time.
That's great. I appreciate that, Matt.
Yep. And I just, you know, when we have capital improvement projects, we need to fund them.
And the good thing is Matt and Mike, the 2 that submitted applications, neither one is requesting more than 75% anyway for their project. Is that correct, Matt?
Well, I'd take 100%, but yeah, you're right. I mean, we have local funds we can match.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that's why we didn't ask for everything.
Correct.
Hey, Craig, this is Dan. I thought one of the other points on that 25% match was to have enough budget to pay for the number of projects you need to do to meet your pollutant reduction goal on these construction activities. So that would be an additional need for those dollars in addition to just meeting that 10% match. Because as we discussed, overall on the grant, you shouldn't have any problem meeting that match.
That is a very good point, Dan. Thanks for bringing that up. Correct. When we budgeted the projects and developed this, we had it based off of the $485,000 of total project cost, which was the budgeted amount in activities 2 and 5 plus the match amount, which is $125,000. So thanks for bringing that up, Dan.
I'd like to point out too that the main reason I think we put it up to that 100% was to allow that flexibility. Because if we have a really good project that can't leverage any match, and we could use then this policy to do 100% cost share for that particular project. So I think that this language, I think, gives us the flexibility to do that 100% that Matt Moore is talking about, but then also gives us a little bit more of security to get the match lined up. I also think that this is one of those things that we should relook at this in a year and see how it's going, because as we're developing our annual budgets and we understand how the process is going to work and where the match funds could possibly come from, I think we're going to find that, as Matt was saying, we have plenty of match, and that we might be able to have a little bit more confidence that we're not going to have to be as nervous or cautious about getting that match lined up.
And may I just add, Jay, to your comment is I'd like to hear from Tiffany and Craig if they have projects and, you know, what they have for match. Because, and I'm not criticizing anybody, I'm just saying that we're going to be able to meet the match in Washington County with no problem. And I want our dollars to go to the north half of the watershed.
Matt Downing had his hand up. Why don't we let Matt go first?
I guess maybe I misunderstood something when I went on my tirade last meeting about being worried about having to match every project and all the reporting that went that. Didn't we talk about how like MREP was going to match the whole damn thing basically? Wasn't that what, or am I completely misremembering what conversation we had? And the crickets start.
Yeah, my recollection is, as Craig described, was that we'd be looking at those ag urban projects to be the primary match for the overall grant. So similar to what you're saying, but different source.
Okay, yeah, maybe I miss yeah, but I don't know. I guess I'll just reiterate that concern then of like feeling like if we have to, I don't know. I'm on Matt's side. That's why Matt wanted me to talk probably, but I hear what you're saying as well. So I trust y'all.
Yeah, and I have talked to Craig already about potentially leveraging MREP as match and as a reoccurring local match. And what we hadn't done at this point yet was met with all the partners to make sure that they're okay with us using those funds as the match. And so, and that typically, and I think that's something what we'll have to do is on a reoccurring basis is as part of Angie's annual MREP meeting, have that topic of Lower St. Croix, One Watershed, One Plan match be part of that, because we can't double count match. If someone's using those dollars to match something else, we can't also use it to match Lower St. Croix. And so that could change from year to year. But yeah, we have talked about that.
And I just don't want Craig to think he's going to be left hanging out there. We're not going to leave you hanging.
I appreciate that very much. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, fortunately, the grant is with our office. So I got to make sure to protect, to leave us on high risk.
That's correct. You're doing your job.
So Matt, to answer your question, I'll start with then Tiffany can go second. For us, the only local match that we have for projects is the Chicago Lakes Lake Improvement District, gives us a small amount of money each year for project dollars. The rest of our county does not have any local funding source for match. We do have federal dollars, of course, which everybody on this group has access. Well, everybody's landowners on this committee has access to federal USDA dollars if they apply and are successful to receive them, which can be used for match, but are only non-state local dollars to Sauk Lakes Lake Improvement District.
Yeah, and we don't have any projects that we're looking at right now to be completed with these dollars, but we don't have any non-state local match from any type of group within this drainage area. And I'm thinking the same would be true for Pine. And so that's where the problem could be in coming up with some of that match. And we always strive to have match from landowners, but sometimes on these larger projects and the really good ones, landowners don't want to throw in $5,000 for something that they don't see an immediate benefit for or weren't planning on.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. Like Tiffany said, we don't have any local match. Usually we're scrounging for that to find that, and there's the possibility of maybe a project in that area in our southern part of our county that would fall in that Rock Creek area. But there's some new landowners on that property, so I think that's kind of the hiccup there. Not sure if those landowners are willing to participate like the former landowners sounded interested, but that's neither here nor there. If it comes to be, it comes to be, but then there's that match issue that we have. So,
And so Angie, Craig, if I may, I'm not complaining. We can meet the match.
Mm-hmm.
As a watershed district, we can do it. So I'm not complaining. I want to get projects on the ground, and I want our money going north of our district, but we do have projects in the docket that are shovel ready.
So currently, the proposed language says host approved percentage range, typically 75%, but potentially up to 100%. Does that accommodate the need that everybody has to potentially need full funding up in these northern areas, and maybe in the southern areas we don't need to have the full percent, then we're only using 75? I guess I'm just trying to figure out if that proposed language that the steering committee is reviewing right now meets everybody's needs.
Can this
Well,
be something that is?
the conversation we had was about capital improvement projects. And if we have projects that are ready to go, we should fund them.
Like fully fund them, you're saying, not 75% fund them.
Correct. Well, 10% is what the state requirement is.
Okay.
Susan Shaw from Mille Lacs County is the one that proposed 10%.
Karen, what were you?
I was just thinking more long term on all of this, just sort of the equity aspect of all of it I feel like eventually the more northern areas need to the elected officials need to understand the value of how much money can be leveraged by finding and getting this 10% and the things that can be done with that, and wondering if on a longer term basis there could be more conversation from like the NEMO aspects of educating the officials. Obviously as a staff, we have to live within the budget we have, and so if we can be creative as a group in order to come up with a total 10%, I'm super supportive of that and figuring out how that can happen. But from a long-term equity perspective, I don't feel like we can always have South Washington paying for everything that's north of him either.
I think there's some sense in that. I think we're at a new point where, these watershed plans are so new. And I think that it's been a pretty eye-opening experience for a lot of the board members and county commissioners that have participated. So I think building that in so that education continues. And I think things like Angie's suggestion to meet at some sites. I think there's new board members for both SWCDs and for counties that are really just learning, and and I think there's a lot of room to be gained. So I think that makes sense to have some of that in mind for the future. But also bearing in mind that some of us are sitting as, I think the 7th most impoverished county out of 87. So there's just a tax base issue that is not going to go away over a 10-year plan.
I was thinking of that also, Caleb, that, there's a difference between wanting to provide local match and actually being able to provide local match. And I know that, even for relatively small watersheds in Washington County, often the tax base is a lot higher just because it's a lot, richer area.
Caleb, thank you for that comment.
I think that that's important for us to keep in mind that we are very early on in the process. And I think the proposal that we have gives us the ability to move forward and get these 2 projects supported so we can actually get the funding allocated to these 2 priority projects, and then relook at this language as this process evolves a little bit more. So I think what we're at a point now where we really do need to make a decision, to make a recommendation on how we want to proceed, but it doesn't mean this is how we have to do it forever in the future. And this language is flexible enough, I think, to address Craig's concerns about match and Matt's concerns about taking more of a CIP-like approach, an annual budgeting approach to projects, which is something that watersheds are used to being able to do, and the SWCD folks are not. So my recommendation would be to support the language that we have and move forward.
And I think moving forward, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Are you all right with that?
Yeah, and I honestly, if moving forward, this is the way the group wants to work, the 10%. We could easily just say every activity has to have a 10% match, and then that takes care of it very easy. That means every activity has 10% match, whether it's activity 1 or activity 10, and we could go that route in the future with future work plans.
But for now, let's use the language that we have in the memo.
Yep. Yeah, I'm
I like
great
the
with it.
flexibility.
Yep.
Yep, I do too.
I'm good.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay.
Jamie, you're okay?
What does Matt Downing think?
Now, is there anybody who is not okay with the?
Where is he?
Oh, we got a thumbs up.
Oh, boy.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we don't really have,
Tiffany, are you okay with that? Okay.
Angie, but we do need to talk about Mike Kinney's request.
yes. Mike Kinney, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, did you want to speak? I know you sent an email to everybody. I can paste the language of your email into the chat, but you can talk to the group as well about what you want to see happen.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the proposed language. What I'm just suggesting is a caveat that for any ag fields, that first and foremost that, and I mean, I worked for a soil and water conservation district for 12 years, and all the farmers I work with, when we asked them to meet T, had no problem with this request as a requirement of cost sharing, which we were able to come in at 70% at, based on what NRCS, we had no local fund to match. So I don't think this is an issue if presented with good information. So, I mean, I've brought this up before, but I just think that we could ask, or I guess the maybe the challenging thing for those have to go out and talk to landowners, whether or not you're willing to communicate the value of doing some of these what considered soft practices, requiring changes in management and stuff, and fundamentally, I think you know, there's some more training. I've been suggesting that we use some of the money to train some of the existing staff in some of these areas more, or help facilitate getting them that training, because that's really where our biggest load is. And it really will also help financially farmers be more profitable at the end of the year if we're seeing locations where there's excessive, what I refer to as recreational tillage. So it's going to improve water quality, improve habitat. And it really comes down to then, it's not a runoff problem, we have an infiltration problem. So that's really where it comes down to. And it's just my recommendation. I think if we had a group of farmers in on this conversation, I would be very surprised if any one of them would be against that. Because in my experience, I've never encountered that. So I think we just need to be open with them and ask. And if we need to go back and ask a group of farmers if that's what they would be interested in supporting, I think we would find support for that. But so that's the only piece. I'm fine with the cost shared language that you're suggesting, but I think that we can. Well, I know that we can add that if we want to. But I guess if we want to, in my opinion, help farmers be more profitable and get more return on investment for taxpayers, we would pursue a goal or a structure that would have something like that contained within the framework. I think it's very reasonable. Thank you.
So Mike, Jackie mentioned this proposed language at the policy committee meeting on Monday. I don't remember if you were in attendance or not, but
no, my daughter had
a couple of the policy committee members, the ones who are themselves farmers, I don't think they had any problem with this. In fact, they were saying that tea should be kind of a bare minimum, is what I remember the conversation being, that they said most of the farms in the area are meeting tea, but that a lot of them aren't meeting, they're exceeding the nutrients runoff, that they might not be meeting the soil loss, or they are meeting the soil loss, but not the nutrients runoff. So they thought that, tea was kind of a bare minimum, but that we should ideally be getting farms to do much better than that. Did I summarize that conversation okay? Anybody else who was in attendance?
That's close, Angie. Mike, what are you asking for?
Well, tea is if you're familiar with tea, it's a longevity calculation.
I'm very familiar with tea.
Okay, so I'm not sure if everybody.
Can I interject quick here? I think we can get to this quickly, but I just have a quick question for you, Mike. Are you suggesting that for a farmer to be eligible for cost share, he also has to meet T?
Yes, especially like if you're going to do a WASCOB, because
Right.
I'll be honest,
Okay.
I really dislike those practices for a variety of cost benefit reasons, but also just it's a lost opportunity of helping farmers. So that's the real thing. And that's where we're trying to put together with that new ag support person, maybe Aid in our office, maybe he can start helping with people. I hope we can get to that point. And really communicating those elements. And because people that I know that are doing cover crops in particular, and I make a point, I've been communicating with several of my neighbors that are doing it, and I asked them specifically, are you getting paid to do any of this? And they're like, no, I'm doing it because it's making me more money. And the one just last week went to Brookings, South Dakota to take his daughter over to look at the university over there, and was just shocked. He told me, he says, I counted 2 green fields all the way across Minnesota. He says, I couldn't believe it, because he's been doing cover crops for 10 years now. So I don't know what the challenge is, or where some of that is. I think it is bringing in other farmers to have conversations, and I think sometimes if we can ask people, I think they'll meet that goal. I just think it's not onerous to ask that of the farmers, or at least if we're going to come in there with some tax dollars to help fund the project. Because I think they go hand in hand. So, and if you're not meeting T, you can overwhelm some of those practices that you might be funding in short order if you have a big event.
So I have a question. Craig Mell, who who in the county is not meeting T?
We don't have a list of the producers not meeting T. I don't have that list.
Okay, but at 30% residue, you're meeting T.
Not necessarily. It depends on, there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Well, you're close. At 30% residue, you're close. I just don't. T came out in 1980 something.
Early 80s, yeah.
So it's old technology and everyone's meeting it.
That's not accurate.
I disagree with you, Mike.
We can drive around and, I don't know. I think part of it is that, how many fields are we actually doing conservation plans on? That might be the more important question. And that's where I'm trying to support the SWCD, Craig, and trying to get more of that done. I would like to see more Mary Jo's on staff.
So my question is, does the group understand what T means? Because T doesn't mean what's leaving the field, it's what means what's moving around the field. So whenever you're running a Russell equation, it doesn't mean that's leaving the field. So I think that's just something we need to make sure we understand, that you can have sediment moving around a field that's not leaving a field, and that could be not meeting T. And you could have a field that's meeting T that has more sediment actually leaving a field than a field that's not meeting T because it's staying on the field. It's a formula that shows what's moving on a field, not leaving a field, and that's the difficult thing to remember.
So I think an implication of that then is if we have a farmer who has an eroding field and they don't want to do conservation practices and they only want to have a water and sediment control basin, even after we've talked to them about the benefits of doing all these different tillage practices or doing cover crops or whatever, what Mike is suggesting is then that they would not be eligible for the cost share until they do additional conservation practices.
Well, I think you could
itself.
You could also change it. You could change the structure of the cost share. You could say, okay, well, you pay for 30% of it. We'll come in with 70, more traditional cost share. So if you want to go to 100%, then you get the T. I'd be shocked if if somebody was doing a conservation plan and you gave them those alternatives, if somebody would say no. I mean, there might be one in the whole county, but.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of implications and a lot of options for us to try to promote conservation practices instead of edge of field work. And that's something that we're all trying to work on as well. And I think what Mike is trying to get at here is one piece of a larger cost share policy that I think we really need to develop more thoroughly. And then there'll be a lot of components to that, because it won't affect the two projects that we have on our plate right now. So what I would like to do is to take this concept of trying to promote conservation practices as a priority over edge of field practices or structural practices. So non-structural versus structural, especially for corn and soybean, that we have a more thorough conversation about how we really promote that, and requiring T or something like that, or having some sort of phosphorus runoffs threshold would be part of that conversation. Because if you don't cost share projects without meeting conservation goals, then that's an incentive for them to do some of those conservation goals if they have a ravine that needs to be stabilized. So, but I think there's a lot of other things we can do, and I don't want to get caught up too much on just this T topic, because that's one small piece of the puzzle. And then we need to have a broader policy, but it shouldn't slow us down today, because we don't have to have that solved right now. We just need to be able to move forward with the two projects we have on the table.
So I would like to hear from Craig and Tiffany and Caleb. I mean, we've got the Lower St. Croix, Denmark Township, lots of ag land, but we don't do a lot of ag stuff. But I'd like to hear from those that do.
I guess one thing I'll talk about, one of our big projects was at the St. Croix Escarpment Gully Inventory, where we started the work. Staff identified desktop-wise 500 and some gullies along the top of the St. Croix Escarpment from the Wild River State Park down to Washington County, and I know Washington County wants to continue that study all the way down, or at least partway down. That study, anyway, came all the way down to like 35 projects or so that was funded by Clean Water Fund grant. Most of those were either edge of field or off the field, large gullies, because the area above had been harvested of the timber back at the turn of the century. The gully formed, was there, cropland was still there. We have producers doing corn, bean, hay rotation with cover crops that we still have active gully erosions downstream. They're well exceeding or meeting T, I should say. But we still have gully issues down below. It's great. We have farmers who are not necessarily meeting T, and we have gullies down below, and we're working with them. It's difficult for myself when we go out, and Mike, I'm not against these type of requirements. I think we should have more requirements even on the urban side, because why are we singling out just the ag side for not meeting T when we have a lot of residential stuff that could be doing a lot of upland treatment to correct the gullies downstream of that pipe. But I do look at, and I think, if we're going to go out and meet with them, we're going to ask them to change to maybe putting all no-till, or it depends what the requirements would mean to get to T for them. And again, T is not a simple answer. It's a variety of issues. Those would just be my concerns. And I agree with Jay. I think what I'd like to do is throw this back to the subcommittee to have some good discussions, because right now we don't have any ag BMPs we're coming forward with for these funds. And I don't know about ISANI or the other partners, I should say, but we don't have anything right now. And I think this would be a good discussion to move forward with, because there's a lot of variables, and we could bring in outside resources, Bowser, NRCS staff, to talk about these things. So again, I think it's good discussion, and we need to look at how we can set this policy up moving forward. But there's a lot of variables that impact these things. Thank you.
I think it's an interesting point, but I kind of agree that could be a discussion for the future with the subcommittee. We should go forward at this point.
And I'm fine with that. I just don't want to, I think we need to leave ourselves open to being able to be flexible with whether it's a farmer or an urban area. We have to compromise with the landowner on what they're willing to do, and we have to allow ourselves that flexibility. So that's all I want to make sure. Yeah, so conversation later.
Jay, are you good?
I'm good. I do think that this is an important conversation, and we all agree it's an important conversation. We want to promote these conservation practices, and this is how we're going to meet the goals of the St. Croix TMDL. I mean, we're all very familiar with the modeling work that was done with that, and then we're not going to be able to BMP and structurally control our way to achieving those goals. We all know that. The trick is, how do we incentivize it, and how do we work with farmers to do it? And so, Barbara, just get on that, okay?
Hey, just Dan,
I'm all over it.
So then we'll have more information about how we're going to move forward with that agronomist position, and then we should have some subcommittee meetings trying to help set up the cost share and incentives. But a lot of this stuff, honestly, we're going to be most productive once we have our new ag outreach person on staff too, and work with them to help move this process forward.
Hey, I just wanted to add some for y'all to remember, I guess, in the futures. Bowser has a program, I think, that they're doing remote sensing to do soil transact surveys, which would cover soil cover, and that Matt Drewitz, I believe, is the one who's heading that up from Bowser's side right now, so he would be a good resource.
Yep,
that's it.
Craig and I were having a very similar conversation very recently about, getting the base data on how many farmers are actually doing conservation practices, and what's going on in the field right now.
Mike, are you okay?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just feel having had been CCA for 20 years and done conservation planning and working with farmers on their more on their financial, the side of their operations. Extremely consistently, if people are past in doing the conservation planning. So I don't know how we get more staff to be certified conservation planners and such to help with that, or get them to some of the, you don't have to necessarily be a CCA, but you can go to the CCA training to help understand some of the cost elements of different methods and stuff. But to me, when they're largely exceeding soil loss, there's excessive tillage, goes hand in hand with them ultimately having an auction sign at the end of the driveway and them not being in business over time. I mean, that's or worse, being involved with some different groups. There's an unfortunate, or at least in the prior couple of years, a real high level of suicide among young farmers across the state. And that's really tragic. And I think it's when we have an opportunity to help them be more financially viable. I mean, I wish I could spend all my time doing that. But I'm doing other things. I work with as many, local farmers, both in the watershed district and where I live, try to help them understand some of the elements of what they're doing. Not like I have any perfect knowledge and I go out there and, I'm trying to learn constantly. I still enjoy going to meetings or participating in sessions and going online and stuff. It's very complex, a lot of new equipment, technologies, et cetera. So I don't think any one person's gonna have it all. So I'm fine with that, but I just would like to still see either more staff get training on that, on the conservation planning side or whatever to help communicate that, so that we are trying to help them. The soil is their most valuable resource they have on their farm, and keeping it in place, and not just trying to improve the soil health and what that does for productivity. So yeah, I'm fine with it.
Just
one thing I'll just
dirt's a 4-letter word.
What's that?
One thing I'll just
dirt is a 4-letter word.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
One thing I'll just say to the group, this is a conversation my board's had a lot. That's why my board's made a priority. We have 3 staff members who are certified conservation planners. They've made that effort. But if you want to take the root of this problem, a lot of it goes back to our USDA Farm Bill. And you guys spend a little time on the internet, look at the amount of subsidies that some of our producers receive that are not some of our better water quality environmental people out there farming. You'd be amazed. And it's out there. You can go on the internet, do a little bit of research, doesn't take you long to see who's getting the big subsidy payments. It's all about the bushels that they produce. It's not about what the conservation program is. It's not about being egg water quality certified. It's about who produces the most bushels. So during our recent trade war, there was $1.65 per bushel of beans paid over a 3-year period to producers. It didn't have anything to do with what they're doing or how they're putting that crop into growing it. There's the root of the problem. So this isn't just our organization dealing with this.
100%, Craig. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely right, Craig.
So we can try everything we can, and I agree with it. We need to get more conservation out there. I've been thrilled. I'm seeing more cover crops in our county this spring. I've seen more no-till than I've ever seen up here, in part because it's a dry spring, which has helped a lot. Farmers are getting it. The young farmers are getting it. It helps. We're having a lot of field days, a lot of good farmers out there like Lance Peterson that some of you guys are getting to meet right now, and I think appreciating what Lance is bringing to the group, and that's great. But we need to really work on these things because the farm program promotes bushels per acre.
And then crop insurance doesn't cover alternative crops that might have less of an environmental impact. So there's a lot of things we need to work on.
Farm program, farm program, farm program.
And you have one of the best people, knowledgeable people in Jim Burkholz.
Yep, I agree 100%. And Dave Tolberg and Lance, they're all good people on that policy committee helping out.
So not to make it seem like I'm cutting off the conversation, but for the purposes of the steering
Angie,
committee.
I need one more question.
No, go.
What's Matt Downing think?
think I can't unmute. Yeah, I don't know. You're all over it.
So what I'm going to try to summarize what I think the conversation said is that for the purposes of the steering committee meeting today and being able to move forward on those 2 shovel-ready projects in South Washington and Carmar, the group approves that proposed language and would like the idea as the agronomist is getting hired and starting to do outreach for all these other smaller practices and non-structural practices of having a more robust policy developed that really incentivizes people to be doing the right thing before they're doing projects on their land. Yes, did I catch it all? Okay. So is everybody okay with us moving on to the update from the Wetlands Committee?
Angie, can you hold on? Can you throw the information on there regarding this? Because I want to make sure we follow the next steps, what's going next. So the information regarding activity 2 that you shared earlier.
Are you talking about the memo or what are you?
Yes, the memo. Can you put that back up on the screen?
Yeah, let me find it. It's not for some reason showing up as one of my options to share. I think I had it hidden behind too many other things.
No, that's fine. So anyway, just let the group know. So I just scheduled the next subcommittee meeting, which will be June 10th. And at that point, then the group will take these recommendations and we'll start reviewing and ranking the applications that have come in. And hopefully by the end of June, our next steering committee meeting, we will have a list of projects for the steering committee to consider recommending to the Chisago CWC board for funding. Just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that, what our next steps are.
Okay.
Does that sound correct to everybody?
All right, does anybody want to see this memo or is it okay for me to take it down? Okay, so the subcommittee will be bringing a list of projects to the next steering committee meeting to approve.
To recommend approval.
To recommend to the Chisago SWCD. Okay.
And for those of you that weren't at the policy committee meeting, that was, make sure we discussed that with the policy committee and they understood that direction that we're moving forward. That's written up in the work plan. Emily did such a great job writing up that work plan and refining everything for us. That was very clear. So thank you, Emily.
I'm just typing. That's why I got quiet. Okay, so then are we okay to move on to Becky giving an update on the wetlands subcommittee?
So I've sent out a doodle poll and we are getting responses. So it looks like it's going to be next week and we'll have an agenda and start talking about our priorities at that time. And that's it for now.
Okay. There was actually, I'm just going to insert it in here. Derek had sent an email to, let me see if I can find it now to see who got the email.
It was Jamie, myself, and you, I think.
Yes. So he was curious about this HESI project, if it would end up being something that would be coming out of the wetlands funding or the structural funding. I don't know the answer to that question, but I also thought that it maybe might apply to more than one project, because I know that there was one that Carmar was doing too, that they were applying for it as like a shovel-ready structural project, but it also had to do with the wetland. So I could see how there could be projects that it's sometimes confusing which pot to pull it out of. But Jamie, you know the project.
I do, and it's most likely to come out of the wetland restoration pot.
Okay.
If it's funded through One Watershed, One Plan, I think there's a couple of projects on the very early list, but we need to figure out our criteria first, as Becky mentioned.
Okay.
I'll respond to Derek.
Okay. I don't see Susanna here, but I know that she has previously given an update about the internal loading subcommittee. They were one of the first ones to kind of get on the ball and meet. They met back in April and developed criteria for prioritizing lakes for internal analyses And they are putting together a form that they're going to consider at their next meeting on June 3rd and hoping to have a request for quotes going out in the fall. So I think that's the same update she's given at the past 2 meetings, so she probably didn't need to give it again at this meeting. Jay, do you want to talk about targeting analyses?
Yep, we have our first subcommittee meeting tomorrow.
Woo, that was a short one. Okay. Is that all of them then? I think that is all of the subcommittees. So I just put it on here since it was a topic of conversation for the policy committee. For the steering committee, are we okay continuing to meet virtually online for, I'm suggesting it this way because for me, it seems like it's a nice way with everybody's very busy schedules and us all coming from a large geographical area to keep meeting online. And I just wanted to kind of put it out there to make sure everybody else is feeling the same. Okay. Are there things besides for Craig knowing that for sure the group is going to be considering projects for review and approval to the Chisago SWCD board at the next meeting? Are there any other things that people know for sure they're going to be bringing to the next meeting, or any topics that we want to make sure get talked about at the next meeting? Hopefully Barbara and I will just steal the show and we'll have tons of education things to talk about at the next meeting.
Angie, I think we said we were going to distribute the final work plan. Did they end up talking about that final work plan at all?
Nobody had anything to say about it. Yeah.
Emily, I discussed it.
I sent it to them, but nobody had any conversation about it.
Correct, Emily. I discussed it briefly with them as I gave my update. Asked if there's any questions, and we went on to each subcommittee update. Then it went great. So no, there was nobody who brought up anything specific.
Okay, great.
And I also did share with everybody that map that I had created, and people kind of, I don't know, I mean, they kind of nodded and they seemed like happy, and nobody had really any specific questions. I don't know if everybody in the steering committee saw this. I can send out a link to it, but I had put together a map just to visually show where some of these things that we were talking about are, you know, like the communities that we hope to do street sweeping studies, the potential locations of wetland restoration projects, potential locations of ag and urban CIP projects, potential locations of internal analyses. They seemed, my impression was that they seemed happy to just let the staff go and do their work and see how it goes. Those were the words of at least one of the policy committee members. So it didn't seem like they really wanted to talk about, you know, the super specific details of any of these projects, which is cool. Okay, anything else, or shall we all go our separate ways now?
I have one thing, Angie.
Yes.
You get one, Matt.
Of
You've
course.
already had your one thing.
I know.
So word it carefully, Matt.
I will. I just want to say thank you to the group, and especially Angie and Craig leading the effort, and we're going to do good things.
Well, I was going to kind of echo the same thing, but I want to make sure you guys realize Emily has done a lot of work. So
yeah, thank you, Emily.
Yes.
So,
yeah, thank you all.
Yep.
It's a very fun team effort.
Oh, we did. Here's our COVID friendly. You can't see my arms. I'm trying to do a COVID friendly group hug. Oh,
thank you.
That's why we're staying virtual.
Karen's face was like, no, not me. Don't hug
Not
me.
ready. Too soon.
Remember, there's no hugging in South Washington.
Yeah. Only virtual hugs.
Take care, everybody. See you later.
Yeah.